Now, after 2 nights on this topic, I'm glad to tell you that Dick Smith has had a big win over the ABC and their so-called fact-checking outfit with the Melbourne Institute of Technology, or RMIT. The ABC have apologised to Smith. He was right all along, they were wrong. But you'll remember what he had to do to get them to admit that.
So they've brought out this pack of lies which they said they're not going to correct, so I'm going to do something I've never done before in my 80 years. I'm going to sue them.
You're going to sue them for defamation?
I'm going to sue them for defamation. If they won't correct it, I'm sending them a letter tomorrow with the corrections to say that I don't support renewables when I do. I'm a strong supporter of renewables. It's such a lie.
This is a very important win because it exposes the deceit and green left bias of the ABC. It exposes the deceit and green left bias of the fact-checking outfit. And it exposes the big lie of Australian politics and climate activism, the ridiculous pretense that this country can be the first in the world to run a modern economy on a renewable energy plus storage model. Let's go through this. You'll recall the fact-checking attack zeroed in on this statement by Smith. He said, look, I can tell you this claim that you can run a whole country on solar and wind is simply a lie. Smith said this to 2GB. It's not true. They're telling lies. No country has ever been able to run entirely on renewables. That's impossible. But the ABC, RMIT fact checkers took exception. Experts consulted by RMIT ABC Fact Check suggested Mr. Smith's statement doesn't hold up, they said. And apparently, just because Smith favours nuclear power, they described this long-standing advocate for renewable energy as someone who was rejecting renewable-led electricity generation. Another error, and one Smith took as a personal slight. The efforts to prove Smith's overall claim, to prove that that was wrong, were actually quite laughable. Referring to the large and prosperous US state of California, they quoted reports it had been running on more than 100% wind, water and solar for 10 out of the last 11 days between 0.25 and 6 hours per day. Lots of renewable power for short periods. That's the whole point. That's the whole weakness of renewables. They can produce the power at times, but how can we store enough of that power for long enough? As you know, we went to a renewable energy expert of our own.
And so the conversation about whether or not there ever has been one that's been run on renewable energy, I think the answer is no, there hasn't, because most countries are connected to other countries, particularly in Europe.
The desperate ABC RMIT fact checkers also threw up 4 countries they reckon already run entirely on renewables. They quoted a document supplied by an academic citing Albania, Paraguay, Bhutan and Nepal. These are tiny and poor nations with GDPs per capita 8 times lower, 10 times lower, 20 times lower and 50 times lower than our countries respectively. And the fact checkers were only talking about their electricity grids anyway, not their road transport, heating, cooking and other energy consumption.
The ABC quoted Nepal. Now, I've been to Nepal. Most of the people use wood and kerosene. Out on the trekking, you have diesel generators in the lodges. And in Kathmandu, you can hardly breathe because of the diesel fumes from fossil fuels. And the ABC are making out that Dick Smith's wrong. Nepal can run totally on renewables when it doesn't.
Yeah, it was pretty embarrassing stuff from the ABC and RMIT, and the revised ABC story now highlights their own inane comparisons, noting that just 2 years ago, Albania had to import electricity from neighbouring countries because a drought undercut its hydro generation. And the ABC admits that looking at all energy, renewables only accounted for about 1/3 of Albanian energy, closer to 40% in Paraguay, and just 6% in Nepal. Little wonder then that the ABC has had to add all sorts of information and qualifications to its article and publish a statement on its corrections page. The first version of this article was based on the inference that in Mr. Smith's interview he was only referring to electricity grids, said the apology. before going on to say that the article also previously incorrectly stated that Mr Smith had rejected renewable electricity generation. This has been amended and the ABC apologises to Mr Smith for the error. And so it should. And it should have done so immediately without Dick Smith having to come on this show and threaten legal action and get his lawyers involved. But when is the ABC and RMIT, not to mention the Labor Party, the Greens and the activists, when are they going to apologise to the public for continuing to mislead them, for continuing to pretend that a modern economy can run on renewables alone? Something that remains an aspiration for many, but has never been done, and experts say cannot be done with existing technology. So surely Dick Smith, so far, technology might prove him wrong in 50 years' time, but so far, Dick Smith is dead right. No country has done this.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. And you know, what we're heading for, I think, in Australia is baseload renewables, enough hydro to be able to fill the gaps. And there will ultimately be a role for household batteries, and at the very top of the peak, there'll be natural gas.
Yes, gas or nuclear, or interconnections to places that generate power with gas or nuclear. The facts. They have an inconvenient habit of showing up eventually.